International expat entrepreneurs build significant assets over 20 to 30 years. Properties in the UK, operating companies in Dubai, investment portfolios in multiple jurisdictions. Perhaps a holding structure in the UAE as well. On paper, everything looks organized. Then the founder passes away. It usually involves complex delays, exposure, tax friction, and sometimes loss of control. Probate in one country, forced reporting in another, banks freezing accounts until documentation is cleared, executors struggling with cross-border assets, wealth that took decades to build starts to fragment within months. This is not about family capability. It is about structure. When wealth remains personally owned, successors inherit assets. They do not automatically inherit the governance or structure. My name is Shiraz Waheed, and in this video, I will explain why wealth statistically declines across generations, what actually caused that decline, and how properly designed structures such as a UAE foundation, trust, or coordinated succession planning can change that outcome. Most people assume successors lose wealth because of poor spending habits. This is sometimes true, but in international families, structural weakness are often the primary reason. When assets are held in personal name, each jurisdiction applies its own inheritance rules. The UK may impose inheritance tax based on domicile. The United States may apply estate tax on US citus assets. Civil law countries may enforce forced heirship rules. Dubai courts may require recognition of foreign wills. These systems do not coordinate with each other automatically. During probate, accounts can be frozen, business decisions may require court approvals, directors may hesitate to act, and investment portfolios may remain unmanaged during volatile markets. Successors are then forced into reactive decisions: sell assets to pay tax, liquidate holdings to resolve disputes, and distribute ownership among multiple beneficiaries who now have different risk tolerance and priorities. The wealth does not disappear because of lifestyle alone. It erodes because the governance system was never designed. Now, I want to say that ownership and control are not the same thing. When you personally own shares, properties, or brokerage accounts, you exercise control during your lifetime. After your death, the control transfers according to probate law. If three successors inherits equal shares of a holding company, decision-making becomes fragmented. If one beneficiary wants liquidity and another wants long-term growth, tensions develop. If a spouse inherits in one jurisdiction, but the children have forced rights in another, legal conflict becomes a possibility. Governance is the missing element. Governance defines who makes decisions, under what rules, and according to what long-term mandate. Without governance, wealth becomes a collection of assets. With governance, it becomes an organized system. This is where structured vehicles such as DIFC foundations become relevant. A foundation is a legal person. It owns assets in its own name. You transfer assets into the foundation, and then the foundation becomes the registered owner. You do not rely on probate to move assets upon the death because the foundation continues to exist. You can define beneficiaries, governance rules, distribution policies, and succession mechanism inside the foundation's charter and bylaws. A council manages the structure. A guardian can oversee compliance with the founder's intent. Dubai's financial free zones are regulated. One of the most commonly used jurisdictions for setting up foundations is the Dubai's financial free zone, including DIFC and ADGM. They operate under English common law principles, and they are not secrecy-based jurisdictions. Proper compliance, reporting, and KYC procedures still apply. Banks require full documentation. Professional service providers must follow regulatory standards. This structure does not eliminate tax automatically. Tax depends on domicile, residency, and asset location. However, a foundation can centralize ownership and allow coordinated tax planning across jurisdictions with the help of advisors in each relevant country. When assets are owned by a foundation rather than individuals, succession becomes a governance event rather than a probate event. The foundation continues operating the day-to-day after the founder passes away. Bank accounts remain active. Directors of underlying companies continue under defined authority. Investment managers continue to manage portfolios under the existing mandate. Beneficiaries do not receive fragmented assets. They receive rights defined by the structure. You can design staged distributions. You can define age thresholds. You can separate voting control from economic benefits. You can maintain centralized management of operating businesses while still allocating financial benefits across family members. This reduces the risk of forced liquidation. It reduces the risk of family disputes escalating into legal action. It creates continuity. And continuity is often the difference between wealth preservation and wealth erosion. Now, any serious discussion around these structures must address the operational realities. Banks will conduct full due diligence on foundations and trusts. Source of funds must be clear. Beneficiaries must be disclosed where required, and annual maintenance is not optional. Regulatory filings must be accurate. If you are UK domiciled, inheritance tax planning must be coordinated carefully. If you hold US securities, estate tax exposure must be assessed. If you reside in Germany or Spain, local tax rules may affect distribution. Timing also matters in asset protection. Structures created after a legal dispute arises can be challenged. Courts examine intent. Planning must occur before risk materialize. These realities do not weaken the case for structures. They simply require discipline and attention. A foundation or a trust structure becomes relevant when wealth reaches a level where cross-border exposure, business continuity, or family complexity creates risk. If you own operating companies in multiple countries, if your children live in different jurisdictions, or if your asset base exceeds threshold where inheritance tax becomes material, governance planning becomes strategic rather than optional. Families with a net worth of $1 million or more in combined international assets often benefit from centralized control. Entrepreneurs planning liquidity events also benefit from structuring before exit. But not every situation will require this level of structuring. If your wealth is modest and located in one jurisdiction, properly drafted will may be sufficient. If your assets are simple and your succession are aligned, complexity may add unnecessary cost. Structure carry administrative requirements. There are also professional fees to be paid. Council members or trustees must act responsibly. The structure should match the scale and complexity of the estate. Over-engineering can be inefficient. Across generations, the main threat to wealth is not volatility alone. It's the lack of continuity. The first generation builds the asset, the second generation manages it, and third generation often inherits without shared governance culture. When assets are personally owned, each generation resets the legal framework. Probate repeats and tax events repeat, as well as ownership divides further. When assets instead are institutionally owned through foundations or trust, governance continues beyond individuals. You move from the concept of inheritance to the concept of stewardship. That shift will change behavior. It aligns family members around a structure rather than around divided property. Dubai's regulatory framework provides credible base for such governance. DIFC and ADGM structures are recognized internationally. They operate within a transparent legal system. They integrate with global banking standards. When used correctly, these structures don't promise perfection. They reduce friction, they create clarity, and they preserve control mechanism across generations. And that is often the decisive factor. So if you want our help and would like to explore whether these structures fits your situation, you can request a personalized asset protection plan by clicking the link in the description below. That's it for today, and I will see you in the next video.